China is bigger than the U.S. economy, properly measured. That's not a myth. That's a reality. China is far bigger in industrial capacity. And if you go to China, as I do several times a year, China is ahead of the United States on many technologies, not all, but many technologies, and notably technologies that the world really needs right now.
The U.S. still acts like the world's only superpower because it's deeply tied to a legacy of dominance that shaped the modern global order. For decades, America set the rules, economically, militarily, and politically. So admitting that China has surpassed it in manufacturing, infrastructure, and global influence would mean acknowledging a loss of control. Instead, the U.S. projects authority to maintain its image, reassure allies, and deter rivals. This behavior isn't just pride, it's strategy, as conceding ground to China could weaken America's leverage in the shifting balance of global power.
It will dominate electric vehicles for 20 years to come. It will absolutely dominate solar power production, of which it has essentially no rivals in the world. It will dominate zero emission ocean shipping, something of interest to Greece and interest to the world, because it makes the ships. The United States doesn't make the ships. Europe doesn't make the ships, except in much, much smaller numbers. And you could go down a long list of technologies like this. So the point is to just realign our understanding and our delusions of grandeur that come, understandably, from several hundred years of actual power. Not power nicely wielded, not power responsibly wielded, in my view. So I think from a moral point of view, nothing very attractive about it. And as an economist, I have followed Adam Smith all my life because he was an anti-imperialist, very explicitly said, give up the U.S. colonies and trade with them. You don't need to own them. You just need to trade with them. And that's a very good point of view. Those who say, well, at least Europe spread its knowledge and science and so forth. Well, yes, Europe did that, but it didn't have to do that through empire and war and conquest and forced famines and many other things that went along with European empire. It could have done that through trade, commerce, decent human relations with other countries. So we have the world now much more equal in, of course, in literacy, in schooling, in technology, in industrial capacity, even overtaking the Western world in many different areas. And we still have in the West this idea that this is we're preserving the Western-led world, but that's over. And then we happen to have one of the most sorry to say it, but one of the least knowledgeable, conceivable presidents in the United States who, sorry, but knows nothing about any of this. He was a real estate developer. He has no training in anything of this sort. Granted, he knows how to build golf courses, I think, in many places in the world. But understanding these changes in the world actually requires something more. Strangely, in Britain, the idea that the British Empire still exists through the U.S. empire, and it's going to be defended, and we can use every means from MI6 and covert operations to global dominance and so forth, somehow still persists. I marvel at it. As you say every day, better to take care of the national health system rather than worrying about running the world 80 years after losing the empire. But that mirage still exists. And France still has it. And God knows what's in the German mind of Mr. Merz right now, but none of it makes any sense. And when you come to Europe, the point of my article is precisely what you said. Europe is still battling its 19th century and 20th century delusions and wars well into the 21st century. And the idea that Russia's greatest aim in the world is to invade Western Europe is an insanity and such a violation of any basic knowledge of history that you cannot believe a grown-up could say this, much less a grown-up in a position of any responsibility. Yet Europe is twisting itself into a pretzel that is completely useless because of fears that have no basis in reality whatsoever. And those fears are not dispelled because Europe doesn't understand anymore. I mean, European leaders, I should say, do not understand anymore. If you want to understand the other side, pick up the phone, take a flight, invite a counterpart to sit down and have a cup of coffee. They'd actually learn something. So bottom line, the reality is a multipolar world. You see it in the economics, you see it in the technology, you see it in the military force. The delusions are still Western dominance, and within that, U.S. dominance. That gap between reality and delusion is large and extremely dangerous. Donald Trump illustrates it almost every day by giving orders to the Chinese or to the Brazilians or to the Indians or to the Russians. They're literal orders. You must have a ceasefire unconditional by August 8th, he tells Russia. You must stop a court case, he tells Brazil. You must stop buying Russian oil, he tells India. And these are not only not put diplomatically or intelligently, they're on a social post where he's demanding of supposed vassals, which vastly outnumber Americans. He's telling them what to do every day. And then he has these completely ignorant minions around him, completely ignorant, who blow up any last vestiges of diplomacy, like this Peter Navarro, who is, I'm sure, I claim it every day, I think he's the most incompetent person that my economics department at Harvard ever gave a PhD degree to. I do not remember the guy. I'm almost sure he could never have been in my class because of the utter nonsense that's spouted. But this guy's trotted out every day to make it worse in breaking up U.S. relations with 1.5 billion people in India. The only slight thing, Alexander, that I would take, I'd quibble with you on a point you made yesterday. You attributed a lot of this to Lindsey Graham. I agree with that. I call him, by the way, I'm sorry, I hope I don't upset the show or anything else, but I call him absolutely the stupidest senator in the U.S. Senate because I've watched him for a long time, and he's an idiot. And he's just a fool, not only a warmonger, but an idiot. But in any event, it's not right to say that this is his doing, not Donald Trump's doing, because ultimately, I don't agree with Truman on many things, with our President Truman, who needlessly dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan and rather blithely did so. But he was right when he said the buck stops here in the presidency. And we need a presidency that functions, that really functions. And we don't have it right now. And it's just swinging in the wind every day because they don't have even the depth of knowledge within inside the White House to know what they're doing right now. And so, yes, you're right. Trump is responding to these, basically to the military-industrial complex, which is, 80 years built into the U.S. system. He is responding to that, but it's actually the job of the president to say no. That's really the president's job, and he can't do it.